The big story that we're focusing on tonight is a new anti-terror law that was passed by the Gujarat Assembly on Tuesday that has drawn strong criticism from human rights activists who say it's draconian and open to misuse. The same bill was brought in by then Chief Minister Narendra Modi, was rejected twice earlier by former Presidents Kalam and Pratibha Patil on the grounds that it was way too harsh. Among other things, the bill says that now a confessional statement made before a senior police officer can be admissible evidence in court, raising fears that suspects could be tortured into confessing. The police remand period will be increased from 15 to 30 days. The period for filing a charge sheet has also been increased substantially from 90 to 180 days, which could subject a suspect to immense harassment in the interim. Also, telephonic intercepts can be used as evidence, and the new bill also makes it much more difficult for suspects to get bail. The question then is whether President Pranab Mukherjee is going to do what his predecessors did and return this bill, or whether he is going to sign it into law. Well, joining us on the program tonight is BJP spokesperson and senior lawyer Aman Sinha. Here in the studio with us, senior advocate of the Supreme Court Sanjay Hegde. We've got Jaiveer Shergill, spokesperson of the Congress Party. Kavita Srivastav of PUCL joins us tonight from Jaipur. Prakash Singh, former DGP, joins us tonight, and Mr. M.M. Mehta, the former police commissioner of Ahmedabad. Let me ask those who would perhaps have the most expertise. Mr. Prakash Singh, to you first, sir. You've heard what the important provisions of this bill are. Do you believe that this is going to be open to misuse by the police, or that this is something that is needed to fight organized crime and terror?
Look, Nidhi, we have to first remember that we are entering a very critical phase in our political history. I mean, apart from the threat from transnational terrorist groups operating from Pakistan, now the Al-Qaeda has entered the fray. The Islamic State has about 1,000 followers in the country, and the country, if we do not take adequate steps in advance, we are going to enter a very horrendous phase of terrorism. So I think Gujarat, what they have done is an appropriate step, a timely step. Secondly, you repeatedly mentioned that the Gujarat bill was earlier turned down by President Kalam and also by President Patil, but you did not sort of throw light on the background in which the act was not approved by the president. You see, at that time when Narendra Modi was the chief minister of Gujarat state, and the UPA government was just not interested in giving him more powers to deal with terrorists or the organized crime. They were always trying to corner Narendra Modi, and so the refusal of the president to approve the Gujarat bills earlier was purely on political grounds.
At one point, it was the NDA that was in power at the centre when this bill was returned, and the specific reasons why these presidents returned it, one of them cited the telephonic intercepts as being problematic, and the other the confessions before the police as being problematic. So it was both under the UPA and the NDA under Mr. Vajpayee that this happened, Mr. Singh.
Well, but I think it was always political, and you see, the telephonic intercepts are a very vital piece of evidence. They are being used in most of the Western countries to nail the accused, and there is so much of electronic information which is floating between terrorist groups. If are we going to not going to use that against the terrorists? I think that's a very useful piece of evidence. And with the internet being used so very frequently, the social media being used, all that has to be used as evidence against the suspected terrorists.
Okay.
And
so
as
you
far
believe,
as confession before a police officer of the rank of superintendent,
yeah,
no,
it's a senior
I
officer.
will just complete that. See, confession before an officer of the rank of superintendent of police who would be an IPS officer, if that is not going to be admissible in evidence, then you might as well abolish the Indian police service and you create another police force of whatever kind you want to. I mean, you have got to trust your officers at some level.
Okay,
you will trust an uneducated person who gets elected to the parliament, but you will not trust a highly educated person who
well, unfortunately, many senior Gujarat police officers have not covered themselves in the greatest glory in recent years, and I think that is also part of the problem. Or in other states as well, but in Gujarat in particular.
Many politicians.
No, but I just want to get Mr. M.M. Mehta in. He's a former police commissioner of Ahmedabad. I just want to ask Mr. Mehta. Mr. Mehta, do you agree with what Mr. Prakash Singh says in terms of, as a former police officer yourself, do you believe that these are the kind of powers that can be misused by the police, or that they are much needed? Mr. Singh has given a context in which he feels they are necessary. Do you agree?
I do agree with Mr. Prakash Singh, and I feel that the need of the hour is that we should have strong laws to deal with terrorism and organized crime. And Gujarat being a border state with a long coastline and porous border, and the neighboring country has definite designs as far as Gujarat is concerned, for the reason that Gujarat is progressing very fast, and secondly the 2002 riots which took place in Gujarat, they are not going to pardon the Gujarat people of Gujarat, or even the Prime Minister of India, who was earlier terrorist groups resorting to new electronic devices. It is time that we come up to their level of operational efficiency using electronic gadgets and testing the level of SP. If we, as Mr. Prakash Singh said, if we don't test SP level, then scrap the police force and some other force. I have no doubt in agreeing with him. And secondly, that delays are bound to occur when and the remand period is extended now to from 90 to 180 days. And SP is to be believed, remand period is to be extended, and the use of electronic devices, we can get the best of devices available in the world.
So both
and
the police officers
face
both of you feel it's a very needed law. You both feel it's much needed. I'll just take that question to Sanjay Hegde before I get the politicians in. Sanjay Hegde, as a lawyer, now you hear these arguments that both the senior officers have made. Do you buy it?
Well, you see, both the police officers sort of instinctively have stated the very reasons what make an independent judiciary distrust the faith that the police have in tough measures. Why is it that the ordinary law, a confession to a policeman is not admissible? You need a confession to be before a magistrate, because we know from this in this country that a policeman essentially thinks that maintaining law and order is a matter of using the big stick. The bigger the stick you give the policeman, the bigger the misuse. And these laws have been upheld by the Supreme Court in different circumstances altogether. Tada was upheld in the background of Punjab terrorism. In Gujarat, for instance, after the Akshardham incident, I can't think of any one single major incident of terrorism which has occurred in Gujarat. From 2007 onwards, and even in Akshardham, the people who were arrested were acquitted by the Supreme Court. Of course, if you want India to become a police state, you might as well hand over everything to the policeman. Whatever is said before a senior policeman, believe the policeman. We should trust the senior policeman will be there in the lockup, interrogating each terrorist himself. All that he is going to do is basically put it down to the Thanedar to get whatever information is out. The safeguards that ordinary law provide are there with very good reason.
And
they come with a 400-year history against torture, against what happened in England in the Star Chamber and everything. It has come out of the experience of ages. I would be very uncomfortable with easily discarding them.
Okay,
we are down the road to a police state.
Even in what Mr. Prakash Singh describes as different circumstances today.
Different circumstances today. And in fact, when Mr. Prakash Singh stated the circumstances, I am sorry to say that, but he seemed to think that there was only one community which needed to be targeted. That one community was the change in circumstance. I am sorry, if that is the way a senior retired policeman speaks on national television, I think that we are going down the road to a very bad police state in India.
Mr. Singh, would you like to respond before I take this to Aman Sinha?
I would like to respond. Mr. Sanjay Hegde has, I don't know how he has jumped to a conclusion that I talked about a community. I never talked about any community.
You said Al Qaeda. You said everything.
I mean, why is he trying
I have not. I did not hear any other
Why is he
community
trying
being
to
mentioned.
divert the discussion? Why is he trying to polarize and divert the discussion? If he does not want to face the grim realities which are happening in the world, if he wants to bury his head under the sand like an ostrich, let it be his pleasure. But let him not stake the future of the country to such an ostrich-like policy. I mean, there are two options before the country. Either we take proactive steps, or we wait for 100, 200 people to get killed and then think of enacting stringent laws. So it's the choices of the people, of the country.
Aman Sinha from the BJP wanted to come in. Aman Sinha, the problem though is, and you're a lawyer as well, you understand this. You know how the police across the board in this country misuses its powers, whether they are senior officers and otherwise. And as Sanjay Hegde says, there's a reason why the laws across the country have checks and balances, you know, and all over the world do have certain checks and balances. I mean, you know what happens when suspects are taken into custody, how confessions are beaten out of them. Do you really believe that this law is the way to go?
Nidhi, India is the prime target of terrorists and organized crime syndicates all over the world, and we need tough laws in order to face the grim realities, geopolitical realities which are prevailing all over the world, and we need to empower ourselves with these tough laws. Now, as far as the question of legality and veracity of these laws are concerned, they have all been put to judicial scrutiny before the Supreme Court of India. In a series of cases, in a catena of judgments, the Supreme Court has upheld their validity, whether it is with respect to confessions, whether it is with respect to the period of obtaining bail, whether it is with respect to right to privacy, etc. All these questions have been examined in detail, and Supreme Court has upheld their validity. Makoka, which has identical provisions, Supreme Court has looked into it, and after considering all possible arguments which are being given on the panel also today, they have said that they are not against the virus of the Constitution. They have upheld the validity. Thereafter, I do not see any reason for anybody sitting over judgment of Supreme Court and opining their own independent view. That is not going to count for much. Now, let me also say that Makoka, which was passed in 1999 by the Congress government of Maharashtra, it had identical provisions, and Gujkoka also has provisions akin to it. I don't know why Congress party is playing politics over this. And there were certain legal issues which already stand settled by the Supreme Court. And in today's age and time, the terrorists work in a very sophisticated and a very dangerous manner.
Why did two presidents of India feel the need to return this bill?
Which evolve with time in order to deal with their such heinous acts of terror.
Sure, but why did President Kalam and President Pratibha Patil feel that this was a draconian law and they sent it back with very specific objections?
No, he never said it was a draconian law.
There was
Maybe on some issue he may
there was a very
have had a
specific
different
objection
opinion
that was made
that
by
was
both of
never
them. I read
rejected.
those out.
What was the objection?
One was about telephonic intercepts
What
being
was
used
the
as evidence,
objection?
and the
Let me
other was
ask you.
confessions before the police, both as evidence.
And bail.
And the fact that it's going to become much
And
more
you're
difficult
right,
to get bail.
both these points, the legality of both these provisions was examined by the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court has upheld the legality of both these two provisions. They do not violate the right to privacy. They do not violate Article 21. Even the confessions in cases of this nature have been upheld, that they also do not violate any provision of law or CRPC. And therefore there is no cause for
Wait, I'm just going to get Sanjay Hegde
finding
to intervene on the legal
something
point that
which
you're
doesn't
making.
even
Then come to
exist,
Jaiveer
and
Kavita.
opining on something.
Yeah, Mr.
No,
Hegde.
that is a legal point
No,
which
no,
has
but I
been
want
made by
to-
the
I
Supreme
want
Court
him
of
to
India.
give us
And
his
once
view on
Supreme
this.
Court of India has adjudicated, I don't think anybody has any
Is it a
right to
closed
sit over
chapter,
judgment of
Sanjay Hegde?
Supreme Court of India.
This is not a closed chapter, and you must also remember that the Supreme Court recently, when it struck down 66A, said that it may the very fact that you may not misuse a law does not mean that it will necessarily be upheld, because the possibility of misuse itself of a bad law is enough to strike it down.
No,
The Supreme Court
please let me
also
remind,
Aman, let me have my say.
The validity has been specifically upheld.
Makoka was nevertheless, we may have been upheld, but Makoka was also upheld with certain riders.
Bharat Shah case in
the
large
same
number
as
of
Tada,
cases.
the same as Tada and Pota, each time the Supreme Court has dealt with it, it has put in riders. It has not unilaterally upheld, because the Supreme Court has had a bad experience, and that was during the Congress and in the emergency.
No, the virus was challenged, Sanjay. The virus was challenged,
Aman, please let
and
me
their validity was upheld by the Supreme Court.
In 1976, during the emergency, the Supreme Court was faced with an argument by the then Attorney General, who said that if a policeman took a citizen outside the campus and shot him, that there would be no remedy during an emergency. The Supreme Court was at that point of time persuaded to think that the right to life came out of the Constitution alone, and it was a gift of the Constitution. After that, the Supreme Court has repented, and
so you're saying it's not a closed chapter?
It's not a closed chapter.
Okay, Jaiveer, is there a political argument that's also being made here? Because the fact is, Maharashtra also has a law that many consider to be draconian, and therefore is this double standards.
Nidhi, being a lawyer myself, I'll give both political and legal answers. First things first, let's be clear. All the Supreme Court decision which is being referred here and being misinterpreted as a general license was the case of PUCL versus the Union of India. And Supreme Court laid down the foundation, in fact, saying if a law has to be passed, a draconian law, you have to look into the rationale. Number two, insufficiency of existing laws. So look at the argument. Today, the argument is rational is you have Makoka and Maharashtra, please apply the same in Gujarat. That does not pass the legal sound test of rationality of state specific. And secondly, how does Unlawful Activities Prevention Act does not address the problems of Gujarat? Number one. Number two, any weapon or law can be used both ways. Either you secure peace or you create havoc in the name of the peace. Now consider Gujarat's notorious reputation. Amnesty International report dealing with Gaikad Haveli police station, how they misused Pota. So the larger question is Gujarat government competent or can be trusted enough to deal with this law? Number three, Aman, I didn't interrupt you. Aman, I didn't interrupt you. Aman, I didn't, let me complete. Let me complete. Number three,
please remove
the political
report.
Aman,
you are not going to abide.
Please remove the political angle
of the Supreme Court, and you are going to place reliance on the Amnesty International.
Aman, you got your time.
Supreme Court of India's adjudication will count.
One second, Mr. Sin, I'll give you a chance to respond. Let me finish this point. Yeah.
Third, Nidhi, as you said,
presidents of all these provisions were challenged. Specifically, it was said their prayer was that all these provisions violate the several fundamental rights, and therefore they are violative of the Constitution.
Is not,
the Supreme Court
let
of
me
India
complete, you will get your chance.
Mr. Sinha, just give him a
that
second.
They are not in violation
Let's
of the
just
virus
give Jaiveer a chance to finish the point that he's making. I will give you a chance to respond. Yeah.
Nidhi, the question.
No, please do not make incorrect legal propositions.
Okay, let him finish. Let him finish. Let's not talk over each other, because there is no point in doing that.
Nidhi, the question is let's not confuse the question of vires, the competence, with the need for this law. There are two different aspects. Lastly, when the two presidents rejected this, it was on pure legal grounds. Clause 20 said bail for 1 year can't be. 43D of our Unlawful Activity Prevention Act says you can give bail. What is the reason today of non-adhering to the advice of the president, advice of Atal Bihari Vajpayee? Now, lastly, I heard the respected police officer saying it's a border state. Nidhi, I'm sorry, Punjab is a border state, Rajasthan is a border state. Border state alone cannot be the rationale of the law. You already have a law in place. Please point out the deficiencies in this law, how it does not address Gujarat.
Let me get Kavita then in. Kavita, I mean, when you look at the various aspects of this law, do you believe there's a certain confidence with which the Gujarat government now thinks that it will perhaps, go through this time and the president will sign on?
Yeah, absolutely. The Gujarat government is now confident that the chief architect of this law, Mr. Narendra Modi himself, is now the Prime Minister, and we know that it's a very centralized system of governance. The hope is that when sent by the Home Ministry, Mr. Pranab Mukherjee will not sign it, hopefully. I mean, we will appeal to him till the end. But I want to bring in some points also here. I firstly think this law really cannot be implemented. It's a complete recipe of abuse. It gives so much powers to the police. It challenges the very principle of Indian jurisprudence of presumption of innocence. You know, how can we have such a law which shifts the burden? How can we have such a law, number one? Number two, denial of bail. So they're going to take away, this law is going to take away the right of the judiciary also. And it's going to be so overbearing with so much of overreach. And look at the unfair procedure. I mean, how can you have this confession business? It's absolutely unfair procedure. Will the police, who wants to make out a case, who is now going to hand over a case and is part of the prosecution, not just torture and make any statement? I mean, this is not permissible even under international law. And I think we have a system of checks and balances, which is really, really good. Makoka may have some of these draconian things. It doesn't mean that we keep repeating it. I don't think if there is a law which has something which is illegal, we need to repeat. We know as activists the number of people in the name of terrorism who are just in jail and never get the chance to see the light of day. The trial takes years, 15 years, 16 years. Can we allow a law which further strengthens this kind of just putting away behind bars without any hearing? No, I don't think any human rights group is going to allow this law. We are going to fight it tooth and nail.